Hi, looking at this album here, Every Time I Die, it's New Junk Aesthetic, which I think was their fifth album, 2009. And this was their first album on Epitaph. I don't know how many albums they had on Epitaph, but this was certainly their first one. Epitaph is, was, I don't know if they still are, a independent label. I know a lot of those independent labels didn't stay independent, or they were kind of bought out or entered into deals with major labels. But anyway, Epitaph were at one stage, and perhaps still are, a independent label started by the guy from Bad Religion, Brett. Uh, can't pronounce his second name. It starts with G. I remember. He started a label and signed a lot of the kind of, I guess, American punk bands of the 90s, late 80s, 90s, pop punk, some hardcore. A lot of those bands, even the kind of some of the ones like Offspring, for example. I think the first couple of albums, at least of Offspring, like Smash, for example, which went on to sell 5 or 6 million copies, was on Epitaph. Um, and they also had like other labels, like subsidiaries, like Burning Heart, for example. They did a lot of the Swedish hardcore, like for example, the Refused album. Don't know if it was all Refused albums, but certainly Shape of Punk to Come was put out on Burning Heart, one of the greatest albums ever released. Um, anyway, not really important, I guess, in the great scheme of things. Every Time I Die are a band that I guess if you're gonna label them as something, I guess you'd say metalcore. I don't really like that term metalcore because I think it kind of it incorporates a lot of bands that I think don't really sound alike at all. But at the same time, I can kind of see why it's used. I'd say they started off as a hardcore band and they increasingly use elements from metal. And I've seen a few times, and in an interview, I heard, I think it was with Keith Buckley, the singer, he mentioned it as well. The term Southern rock is for some reason associated with these guys. I don't really understand why. If perhaps maybe only, and this is the thing that kind of sets them a bit apart from their contemporaries. If you took like a band, like for example, I don't know, like Norma Jean, another great band, but the thing that I think sets Every Time I Die apart is that they have a certain rawness in parts of their music, and particularly when Keith does clean vocals. Uh, You see, I don't really feel qualified enough to speak about these kind of things because I don't really know enough about Southern rock to be saying, well, in this time they sound like Southern rock. But yeah, I think there is something a little bit different about them because to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of metalcore. Usually, if you go through like most metalcore bands, there's usually a handful of songs of each of the bands I do like, and they've usually got some really good riffs and stuff. But a lot of the bands are way, way, way too overproduced and sheeny, and it just sounds robotic, And that's maybe the thing I like about Every Time I Die is that it doesn't sound like that. It's got a much more raw, real sound. Um, but anyway, this one, like I said, this is their fifth album, so they've been going for a while by this point. And like I said, they started off more as I guess, a hardcore band, and they kind of evolved slowly. But I found each album, they all follow. It follows like a linear pattern through their whole career. Their sound. There wasn't any major radical shifts. Sometimes they added more clean vocals to an album, um, and songs that you could imagine. Okay, this one sounds like this could be played on the radio, or But yeah, I feel that yeah they like this album, like their album before this was Big Dirty. And going from Big Dirty to this, it's not a massive jump, but at the same time, there is an evolution of sound. And I think this album's better than Big Dirty, personally. This album's got some really great riffs. Roman Holiday is a very, very simple song, but a great, great riff. Like you can learn to play that on guitar in about 90 seconds. But it's an awesome song. It's like very effective. You know, so I guess a lot of times simple songs are effective, aren't they? They don't have to be super technical and complicated. The Marvelous Slut, Wonderlust. Like Wonderlust is one of those songs where I could imagine Wonderlust could be played on a fairly mainstream radio format. Well, there's a bit of screaming in it, but it's excuse me. Some of these songs also, I didn't know this, but well, I did know one of them, but Greg, is it Puciato from Dillinger Escape Plan did backing vocals for Marvelous Slut. I didn't know that. I did know that the guy from Fall Out Boy, not the singer, not Patrick, what's his name? Pete, the bassist, but I also think he's the main. Oh, there it says Pete Wentz. He's the main songwriter. He's the main songwriter for Fall Out Boy. He does it on. He does backing vocals, and you can actually hear after 1/4 of the Revolution. You can hear him on that. Whereas in Marvelous Slut, I never noticed. Maybe if I listen to it again now that I know that Greg is on it, I would be able to go, oh, there he is. But I never really noticed before. Whereas this one, first time I heard that song years ago, I could tell there was someone else on that, and then I came to find out it was the guy from Fall Out Boy. On one of their later albums, what was it? The one, Low Teens, the guy from Panic at the Disco, Brendan, whatever his name is, he did not just backing vocals, he did actually kind of the chorus vocals for one of their songs. So that kind of scene, those bands, even though you're a Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, Dillinger Escape Plan, Every Time I Die, bands you wouldn't really, well, actually, I would say Dillinger and Every Time I Die, I would connect those two bands. In my mind, those two bands are actually connected, not just sound-wise, even though the sounds aren't exactly the same at all, but they seem like they're from a similar time. Like they both started in the late 90s. They both continued up until relatively recently. They're both from the East Coast, New York or New Jersey, I think. Dillinger's from, or at least that's where Ben's from. So these guys are from Buffalo, and that's kind of like, well, why do I know that? It's not, you don't really know every time we're a band, because that's kind of like part of their identity as a band, is that they're a Buffalo band. They kind of reference it. They made a video for Map Change. Can't remember what album was Map Change on. I think that was on Low Teens as well. And they filmed the video was filmed in Buffalo, and it's an excellent video. I recommend watching it on YouTube. And it doesn't paint Buffalo in a particularly nice way. It actually paints it as a frozen hellhole if you just watch that video. But yeah, for some reason they always let it be known that they're from Buffalo, New York. And they every year, don't know how long this went on for, but pretty much every year they would do a huge Christmas, kind of almost Christmas, like a 2 or 3 day festival where they would get all bands from their scene, or bands that they liked, or kind of younger bands, up and coming bands, and they would have like a 2-day kind of show, and Every Time I Die would headline it on the last night. And so there was always, it seemed very close to their fans. There was like a lot of interaction, and they certainly didn't seem like above it at all. They were like, really, like I said, like a lot of, like Dillinger. Would you say, yeah, I guess Dillinger's Escape Plan achieved a slightly higher level of popularity and fame than these guys. But both those bands, I think there's like hard touring, continuously touring for 20 years, not really getting out of the kind of club theater size shows, headlining for some bigger acts, but of course always kind of always going to be restricted to the audience because of just that style of music's never going to really, unless you drastically change, is never really going to be appealing to arenas or stadium crowds. Um, what else can I say about the, yeah, I guess the songs I like: Roman Holiday, Marvelous Slut, Wanderlust, White Smoke. I love the first riff on that, and was it Host Disorder? It's got a great riff as well. After One Quarter of a Revolution, I like that. I like the two different vocals, how there is, because I see the other guys doing vocals in that. It's good to hear kind of. Sometimes I like a contrast of vocals in a song. Um, I kind of came to Every Time I Die in a very kind of a higgledy-piggledy way, is that I didn't hear them. I'd heard songs here and there from them for over a year, like for 10 or more than 15 years. I'd come across a song, someone would play it to me, or I'd watch a video on YouTube, but it was always kind of like something from their later career, something from the mid period, something from their early career. So I never really had a full kind of, what do you call it, like overview of their sound. And so I think the very first song I ever heard of theirs was from X Lives, was the Underwater Bimbos from Outer Space, which is to this day, I think a amazing song. Great guitar riff in that, and really good breakdown as well. And then like I said, the way that I heard their songs was all over the show. So I guess the image I formed of them, of their sound, wasn't really accurate, because then when I did hear more of their stuff, I was like, oh, okay, they were like this at one stage, or they were like this at one stage. But I guess from about 2013 onwards, I was kind of like, I heard the new releases as they came out. So I remember I think I bought From Parts Unknown, which was 2014. I got that on release, and the same for Low Teens. I got that on release. I got like a T-shirt. I remember, like a bundle, a CD T-shirt bundle. But I got this secondhand probably about 3 years ago for about $5 or $6 at a secondhand music shop. Not a secondhand shop, but a secondhand music shop over in the city. And I'd heard most of it before. I downloaded it, or I think I downloaded the discography at one stage. It seemed, maybe it wasn't, but this is just the way I felt like they were slowly making ground and getting a bit bigger and bigger. They get more and more well known. And again, they never toured down here or anywhere else where I was living. So maybe it's not. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were playing the same club size venues from beginning to end. I don't know. But it seems so when they released Radical in 2021. Everything about that album, I don't know, the sound and just the feel of it. It felt like that was going to be like almost like kind of a breakthrough for them. Like I thought, okay, they're going to finally this is going to reach a bigger audience, I think. And you got to remember that also these guys they're older than me, I think, or at least I'm pretty sure Keith is older than me. Was Keith? Yeah, see, it's Keith. I should say, yeah, the band. It's Keith Buckley is the singer. His brother Jordan Buckley is the guitarist, and Andy Williams is the other guitarist. I'm not sure which one's lead and rhythm, or maybe they both just switch around. Andy Williams is also a professional wrestler. He is not WWE. He's in the new one. Hang on a second. AEW. Sorry, I've never actually watched it. I've seen clips on Twitter and stuff of him, but I've never actually. I don't think it's shown on TV in my country. But he's an actual wrestler. His character is called the Butcher. Excuse me. If you look at him, even if you just saw him on stage, he's a big guy, tattoos, and for a long time he had a shaved head with a huge moustache. if you said that guy's a professional wrestler, it wouldn't be a huge jump. I could see it. I would say, that doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, it kind of does surprise me, or did at the time when he first joined that. Excuse me. Then the bassist and the drummer changed throughout their career. They never really had a steady. They for their first 10 years or so, they had Mike Novak, who he seemed like a good drummer, but he left. And then they had was it Daniel Davison? I think there's someone in between. But anyway, the last guy they had was what you call him Goose. That's his nickname. I can't remember his. I should probably find out his real name. That's a bit disrespectful. But he was known as Goose to fans. And then the same with the bassist. They had Steve. I can't pronounce it. Michiche. He was the bassist in their early career. Then he left for 5 or 6 years. Then he came back, and for the last 10 years, he was the bassist. So he had quite a long tenure, but there was a lot of basses in between as well. So but the three, I guess, the Buckley brothers and Andy Williams were from 1998 up through to 2022, which is when they broke up. So they broke up just after the release of Radical. And if you want to hear a great song of Radical, I would recommend Post Boredom. It's got a really cool bass introduction, bass riff. Well, it didn't end well, is all I could say. Is that I still don't really know what happened exactly. It seems that Keith Buckley had substance abuse problems that were affecting the band, and he cleaned up and left his wife and got a new girlfriend, and the remaining band members felt that his new sober life and his girlfriend's presence was perhaps negative. But Keith would say that they were not allowing him to live a healthy life. They wouldn't accept that he needed this new kind of radical approach to living. Like he took out things like meditation and yoga and complete abstinence from alcohol and drugs, I assume. There was, I don't know, there was a lot of he said, she said stuff by the end of it. Like he overheard them that they were going to try and replace him. I don't know. Oh, apparently, yeah, there was. It sounded like a lot of also because they're brothers. Keith Buckley and Jordan Buckley are brothers. Apparently, Keith Buckley didn't like Jordan Buckley's wife, or was a girlfriend, because she was a Trump supporter or something. I don't know. I was just bummed out that it ended like that, and quite publicly as well, posting stuff on Twitter and Instagram. Dillinger Escape Plan. They ended about 2018ish. They played their last shows, and they really got to end it on their terms. They did this big tour. They released the last album, and then they played, I think it was at 5 or 6 nights at Terminal 5 in New York. And they was like, okay, and they had guests, from out their career, like Mike Patton and stuff like that. And there had been rumors that they'd been through a lot of members over the years, and it was really only Ben Weinman who had been the single continuous person in the band. They'd gone through, vocalists and drummers and everything else, bassists, and he was. But him and Greg had been, I think Greg joined in 2004, and they had a lot of problems, apparently, like creative differences and other personal conflicts, but they managed to kind of keep it together and keep it somewhat private, and then end the band without it exploding. And like I said, I kind of always put these two bands together for some reason, Every Time I Die and Dillinger, whereas this band didn't manage to do that. However, speaking of them, which are kind of, I almost like a natural fit. Now, the remaining members, well, not the remaining, some of I think it's Jordan Buckley, Goose, and Steve Michiche, or whatever his name is, are continuing with new vocalist Greg Puciato from Dillinger Escape Plan. He's the new vocalist of the new project that they've got going, which is called Better Lovers. Andy Williams has not joined. He's I guess going full time wrestler, I guess. But so it's the bassist, drummer, one of the guitarists. Who's that other guy? I'm not sure. There's another guy in there as well. But oh, another thing that I remembered is that the guy who produced this, where did it say? Steve Evans also produced all of Dillinger Escape Plan's albums, as well as a lot of other bands in that kind of area. As I mean that kind of scene, metalcore and heavy metal and stuff like that, punk. So yeah, I guess I've kind of more talked about the band as a whole as opposed to this album. This is a great album. I think all their albums are great. I don't think they've got a bad album. I'd say X Lives, no, sorry, not X Lives. Parts Unknown, maybe the weakest, but then that's got that song Decaying with the Boys, which I love that song. It's got a funny video as well, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they're a great band. I recommend them. I recommend this album, but I recommend their whole discography, start to finish. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with Greg. Anyway, thanks for watching.